What will they do when the banking system collapses? I'd like to start off by saying Barakatay Hawa, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rachakwadash. Welcome to another live lesson. You heard the name of the title of the lesson. And this is inspired by a video I was watching a little while ago. The young elder Amawan Gabar from the New York camp. I was doing a video called This Is Music to My Ears. It's going down and it's about to get real ugly. And pretty much few brothers have done lessons on this whole banking system collapse that's happening, and it's catching on like wildfire, across the U.S. And pretty much what it is a systematic thing that they're doing. It started back, with the sea boogie monster, and then with the jabs, with the, supply shortages, supply chain, backups and shortages and all of that, making a lot of small mom and pop businesses fail. And just, getting people in a frenzy and just devaluing the dollar even more and more by constantly printing more money and putting it into circulation. And what's happening now is that they're preparing the final steps for this, what they call a reset, which pretty much begins with something financial, because if you know anything about world orders, the world order starts when a new system or new economic system is put into place. Just like during the 40s when America became the world reserve currency, that began a new age, so to speak. Now we're at the point where that is coming to an end, and they're bringing in the age of the beast, pretty much, which is, predicated upon the MOTB, which is the micro C-hip. This is why everything is going online, and we've been saying this over and over again through the spirit, because, the prophecies have been speaking, but now they're pretty much roaring right now. And it's getting louder and louder and louder and louder. So much so that individuals that denied that the MOTB was the micro C-hip now are scrambling to try to put stuff into place so that when they do introduce it, because they see it now, so when they do introduce it, they could say, well, we've been saying it was going to be so and so and such, but that's neither here nor there. Jero Salente has a quote, a saying, when people have nothing to lose, they lose it. I'm just merely paraphrasing what he says. And this is what's happening. People's assets, as far as monetary wise, are being, hindered. And what do you think people are going to do when they're in such desperation? That the only way they can get access to their money would be to receive, whatever these banks set up for them to be able to get their funds out. You think people are going to hesitate to jump on it? No, people are not going to hesitate to jump on it because they're going to want to access their money. And that's what this whole thing is about. This is why it's the name of the lesson is what will they do when the banking system collapses? Because this is how they have people, by the balls, so to speak. They're making it harder and harder for them to access money. They're making it harder and harder for them to use credit cards and debit cards, and they're making the future of banking dark, unsure. So the reason why they're doing that because they're getting ready to introduce this new system. Let me see if I can find this one precept real quick. I know it's in the book of Ecclesiastes, right, 7 and 12. It says, for wisdom is a defense and money is a defense. And Barakatah Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, he gave us wisdom as a defense, which is the best defense that you can have. And money is a defense because, as it says in the same book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 10, okay, I messed up. There we go. And verse 19, a feast is made for laughter, and wine maketh merry, but money answereth all things. So you do need money, commerce, currency, whatever you want to call it, in order to be able to function in this society. So this is why they're setting it up, so that the system can collapse. It's really the monetary system. Now, if you notice, this individual by the name of Meyer Amschel Bauer, he stated that give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes the laws, because he understood that money is the way to control society, because money is what people need to function, pay bills, buy food, do whatever they got to do, because that's the system that's in place. So if they, make a hindrance in the system in order for people to get their money, but they make a way for people to access their money a lot simpler, without all of these hassles, the majority of people, which don't know any better, are going to go for it. So what we're seeing in these bank collapses is pretty much the beginnings, the very beginning stages of the introduction of the MOTB, because if they can't get their money out of these banks and they say, well, we've come up with a conclusion, the FDIC has stated, that they will reimburse people their money, but you have to go under a digital system. How many people you think are gonna say, nah, F that, that's the MOTB, we ain't dealing with that? Nah, man, the majority of people are gonna go for it because, one, they're ignorant of what's going on, and two, they're gonna want to access their money so that they can continue living the life that they've been living, to be able to pay their bills, put food on the table, so on and so forth. All right, so I found this article. I was looking for a picture, for the front of the, of the lesson. And I ran across this, is how bank failures contributed to the Great Depression. And those of you that know about the Great Depression that happened back, 1929, October 1929, I believe, it wasn't a very good time. They came out of an era that was very, bountiful. The Roaring 20s, as they call them. I mean, America was on top of the world. And then all of a sudden, when these banks started to collapse, it caused this Great Depression. Wall Street started, fluttering. And all of a sudden, it just came to a crash, to a crashing halt. Matter of fact, I'm going to read this. Dang, that's a bad precept, brother. In Genesis 47, I love going there with Joseph during the time of the famine. A bank run is a sudden withdrawal of deposits of just one bank. A banking panic or bank panic is a financial crisis that occurs when many banks suffer runs at the same time as a cascading failure. And that's what we're witnessing. A tottering. Let me see, I'm going to read this. Gradualism, policy of gradual reform rather than sudden change of revolution, biology, the hypothesis that evolution proceeds chiefly by an accumulation of gradual changes. And that's exactly what it is. It's a gradual change. Now it says, were financial institutions victims or culprits? And they were culprits. Why? Because the international banking families control that. This is why Maya Angelou Bauer said, give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes the laws. Because they already understood that money is what keeps everything in check, so to speak. So it says, on the surface, everything was hunky-dory in the summer of 1929. Remember, these are the roaring 20s. You know, they're coming to the end of a decade of plenteousness. You know, just like the brother put the scripture in Genesis 47, where the Lord gave Pharaoh the vision, and he had, you know, the vision of 7 ill cattle and 7 fat cattle, you know, 7 lean and 7 fat, and it represented 7 years of plenteous and 7 years of drought. And that's what's happening right now. You know, the forecast for the future is economic drought on the horizon. You know, and this is the very thing that they want, because that will help for this reset so that they could introduce the MOTB. Remember, it's prophecy. And no matter how much you try to avoid it and try to sidestep it, you know, you're always going to have to face what the prophecy says, because the prophecy is sure. We have a more sure word of prophecy, and it's going to actually happen. That's why the Lord told Habakkuk, which the brother posted it, you know, at the end it shall speak and not lie, though it tarry, wait for it. You know, so we're at the point now where it's roaring, it's speaking so loud, you know, and there's still people out there that still can't see it. It says the total wealth of the United States had almost doubled during the roaring 20s, fueled in part by stock market speculation, eagerly undertaken by a wide swath of citizens ranging from Fifth Avenue dowagers to factory workers. One Midwestern woman, a farmer, made an overnight profit of $2,000, $31,000 in today's dollars, betting on a car manufacturer's stock. You see? So this is all, the stock market is their forecaster for the future, so to speak. You know? It says, when the bubble burst in speculator fashion in October 1929, many economists, including John Kenneth Galbraith, author of The Great Crash 1929, blamed the worldwide decade-long Great Depression that followed on all those reckless speculators. Most saw the banks as victims, not culprits, but they were really the culprits, part of the culprits, you know, because you have something called fractional reserve banking, which the banks only have to have 10% of assets, you know, and they can, on that 10% of assets, they can lend up to 100%. So if a bank brings in $100, somebody deposits $100, the bank can lend up to $1,000 off of that 100. If somebody deposits $10, the bank can, you know, lend $100 off of that $10. You see, because it's just a fractional reserve. All they have to have is 10% on file, so to speak. You know, and what happens is they invest that money to make more money, and when the people come to collect the debt or their money, they don't have enough to pay everybody out. You know, and this is what happens with a lot of these banks. Right? So it says the reality is more complex. Sure, without all that uncontrolled and irrational market speculation, the 1930s might be recalled simply as a period when the economy and prosperity stalled. But just why and how could those gamblers dominate the stock market? And why did a crisis in the markets become a systemic, decade-long economic catastrophe during which unemployment skyrocketed to 25% and the cost of goods and services plunged? By 1933, dozen eggs cost only 13 cents, down from 50 cents in 1929. Banks failed. Between a third and a half of all U.S. financial institutions collapsed, wiping out the lifetime savings of millions of Americans, which that would do what? That would actually bring in the new reset, because back then they had something called the New Deal, right? So that would bring in a reset to where they could be able to introduce something called UBIs, Universal Basic Income, which is all predicated upon digital transactions, which is digital money, which is pretty much the road to the MOTB, which is the micro CHIP, and we're witnessing this happening, So when we go to Ecclesiastes 12:1, it says, remember now to create in the days of thy youth while the evil days come not. So we're about to enter these evil days, It's just like comparison to when somebody's young, they have good old days, those glory days. But as you get older, you're getting closer to the grave, and, your body is not functioning properly like it used to, that would be the evil days in layman's terms of somebody being young and getting old. Well, these evil days here are speaking about when the end comes, the day of the Lord comes, and prior to the day of the Lord, there's going to be very bad times happening on the planet Earth. Nor the years draw nigh when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. Right, and I'm pretty sure that back then, during the 20s, people thought that America would never go under. They never thought they would have financial problems because everything was, abundant. But just as they were in their security, all of a sudden, boom, the bottom dropped out. While the sun or the light or the moon and the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. Right? In other words, this represents, having no solutions, no understanding, no knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of what is to come. Because at one time they had everything sold up, so to speak, but now, they're in a jam, so to speak. It says, in the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble. Who are the keepers of the house? Today, that would be the management, the house management. The economists, which the word economist means house management. You have economists that are experts in predicting different things that can speak about, the economy and how it's doing and how it's going to do. You also have, stockbrokers. You have those that sell stocks, that get money from investors, and they go out there and they find the best stocks, to invest in to make those investors more money so that they can make money, But in this case, the keepers of the house are trembling because they see how this bubble is about to burst and everything that they work so hard for is collapsing. This is why when you have situations at the stock market where they don't do well, people lose everything and they end up killing themselves because of this this horror of working so hard to build this wealth and then losing it all. It says, and the strong men shall bow themselves. Right, in other words, these strong economically will bow themselves. Why? When you bow yourself like that, that means you're in extreme agony or pain because you lost something. And the grinders cease. What are the grinders? The grinders are the jobs. Everything that you see going on. And also what's going on is they're moving everything to the digital system because you have factories out there that are run strictly by robots. And this is what they're doing. They run strictly by robots. Everything from the production, to the packaging, to the loading onto trucks, to the driving. So everything is being done, in a robotic state, so to speak. And then what's going to happen to the people? They're going to be relegated to these 15-minute cities, receiving the UBI, having to be in the total control of the government, not being able to do anything and just receiving these things, but having to comply with the system. So everything around us that we see, that we witness, is all leading to prophecy, the MOTB, the micro C hip. Everything is going in that direction. You can kick against it, you can talk bad about it, you can deny it, but at the end of the day, prophecy is going to speak. And the grinders cease because they are what? Few. And we see it happening. A lot of people that, were promised, that they can, invest money and make a business and, do well for themselves and for their families. They're seeing that a lot of their businesses are collapsing. Their savings are depleting. The same way they were doing during the time of, the 30s, during the Great Depression. And those that look out of the windows, which are what? The forecasters, the future investors, be darkened. Why? Because they don't see, the future is gray, It says, before we read on, it says Isaiah 19 and 14, I started 14. The Lord hath mingled a perverse spirit in the midst thereof, and they have caused Egypt to err in every work thereof, as a drunken man staggereth in his vomit. And you see that in everything that this place, America, the new modern day Egypt, stands for. Neither shall there be any work for Egypt, which the head or tail, branch or rush may do. Why? Because they're bringing in this digital system. And it's no wonder that they've been, they got robots flipping burgers, making burgers, They got robots doing everything that people normally do. And robots don't complain. Robots don't get tired, every once in a while, maybe once a week or once a month, they may have to be, a maintenance run on them. But just imagine they can go 24 hours a day without taking a break. You see? So this is going to cause that panic, and that and people will be in a desperate mind state to when they offer this micro C hip for them to be able to get their benefits, get their money. What do you think most people are going to do? They're going to go for it because, in their minds, there's nothing else that they can do. So going back to Ecclesiastes, it says, and those that look out of the windows be darkened, and the doors shall be shut in the streets. What doors? The doors of these businesses and everything around it. Why? When the sound of the grinding is low, because when, things get bad, it's only so much that these businesses can do to keep, everything running. That's why you have something called downsizing, where they get rid of certain people that are, pretty much like liabilities. And they start from the bottom and they work their way up. And eventually, if that doesn't work, then eventually they have to, file for bankruptcy, And then once that collapses, then that causes another, company or another business to collapse, and this has a domino effect. And you notice that this is happening worldwide. It's not just happening in America, it's happening all around the world. And he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, meaning early in the morning, and the daughters of music shall be brought low, because even the music in this society is crap. All right, so going back to the article, it says the familiar narrative of the Great Depression places banks among the institutions that suffered fallout from the crisis. In fact, in the eyes of such luminaries as Ben Bernanke, an economic historian and former head of the Federal Reserve, the crisis was all about the banks. From the central bank, the Fed itself, down to the smallest savings institutions. Regarding the Great Depression, we did it. Bernanke said in the 2002 speech, referring primarily to the Fed's role, we're sorry. Here are 4 ways banks did it. Banks extended too much credit. See? Because why? Because they only required to have 10% of assets on hand, and they can lend up to 100%. And that's a term called fractional reserve banking. The runaway speculation that triggered the 1929 crash and the Great Depression that followed couldn't have taken place without the banks. which fueled the 1920s credit boom. See, and this is what they're using. They're using these banks. This is why they have a term called too big to fail. So what happened to that? Because they would take the money that they're printing and giving it to these banks to continue on doing business. You see? New businesses making new products like automobiles, radios, and refrigerators borrowed to support non-stop expansion and output. They kept borrowing and spending even as business inventory soared 300% between 1928 and 1929 alone. And Americans' wages stagnated. And this is what we're seeing right now. The prices of things going up, but the wages stagnating, not moving at all. The banks ignoring the warning signs kept subsidizing them. See? They ignored all the warning signs. There's a movie called Margin Call. Very good movie. I would like to watch that movie again if Spirit allows. And it shows you how all of this works. I believe in that movie because there's a couple of movies that I had watched, that go into that. And they just show you, how you have individuals that were watching, which would be the keepers, and they saw something coming down the road that didn't look good, but everything was downsizing, so they got rid of the main guy that, had the foresight to see what was coming. And then after the whole shit, and they started realizing what was going on, and the whole shit was, in motion, so to speak, they called the guy back. And at first they told him to go F themselves, but eventually, they told him they'll give him some money, and he was in a jam, so he had to go ahead and help out. The banks also funded the speculation itself. Oh, and they have something called fire sales. And fire sales, you always got some demon. A fire sale is when you sell things at a discount. And the scripture that always come to mind when I saw that movie, I believe that's either Luke 16 or Luke 15. I'm sorry, either Luke 16 or Luke 18, but I think it's Luke 16. Yep, here it is, Luke 16:1. And he said also unto his disciples, there was a certain rich man, which had a steward, which was a servant, which would be like these CEOs, CFOs, so to speak, that work for, the so-called international bankers at these different corporations. And the same was accused unto him that he had wasted his goods, because he wasn't a good steward. And he called him and said unto him, how is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship, for thou mayest be no longer steward. Right, so he was getting fired. Then the steward said within himself, what shall I do? For my Lord taketh away from me the stewardship. I cannot dig to beg, I am ashamed. And these different brokers and these different individuals that work in Wall Street and these different corporations, they're not built to work. Because what these corporations do a lot of time is pretty much rip people off. And they have no clue of, of what to do. There was a movie called The Company Men with Ben Affleck. And in that movie, this is what happened. People got laid off, and then they had to resort to manual labor. And they was catching hell because that's something they don't know how to do. They'll get behind a telephone and talk shit, and rip people off. But to actually, dig in and start and do real work, they ain't built like that. It says, I am resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that word steward goes into that word, oikonomos, which is the housekeeper, economy. So it says, so he called every one of his Lord's debtors. So this is what he did. He called the debtors of his Lord unto him, and said unto the first, how much owest thou unto my Lord? And he said, 100 measures of oil. He said unto him, take thy bill, sit down quickly, and write 50. So that would be what? A fire sale. Because he took the assets and sold them at a discounted price. You see, it says, then he said to another, and how much owest thou? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said unto him, take thy bill and write fourscore. So the same thing, right? So what he did was, in order to save his job, so to speak, he sold, or he gathered money from individuals that owed his lord, at a discounted price. Look, you want to get out of this debt, you pay so and so and you'll be out of the debt. So it says, and the Lord commended the unjust steward, because he had done wisely. For the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of men. So that's the point, and this is what you see going on in this whole bank situation. They collapsing, but there's no way to bail out, because at one point they bailed them out, but now the people are left to fit the bill, so to speak. And the FDIC is only, they only insure but so much. I don't know the whole specifics. I'm not an economic expert, but they're only insured but so much money. And let's say that they say, well, we have a new system coming in place where you can get the majority of your money, if not all of it, and it's a digital system, but you will have to do so and so and such and such. What do you think most people are going to do? They're going to go for it because they're going to want to access their money. It says the banks also funded the speculation itself, providing the money that individual investors needed to buy stocks on margin. And then you have something called margin call, which was that movie, Margin Call. Let me see something. Margin call definition. It says a demand by a broker that an investor deposit further cash or securities to cover possible losses. Yeah, because they knew that losses were coming, so they had to, figure a way to keep everything going. Oh, look at that. The brother said 97% of the depositor's money is not insured. Beautiful. You got economic experts out there. It said that the Midwestern farmer might have borrowed up to 90% of the money she needed to make her overnight killing on the automobile stock, financed by her local bank. Bank lenders discounted or downplayed growing signs that Americans were overstretched. And brothers, this place has been overstretched. You talking about a few years back being billions in debt, to now being trillions in debt. Farm incomes in particular plunged in the years leading up to 1929. And what's happening with these farmers? What's happening with these chain supplies? And others found their wages stagnant. And you see that. You see the wages of people stagnant. The economy is suffering and people's wages are stagnant. It said their prosperity came solely from their stock market wealth, which didn't last. And that's exactly where we're at right now with it. So it goes on and on. I'm not going to read anymore. I did put this in the description box, so if brothers are interested, you can draw the parallels of the 1930s Great Depression, to what's going on right now. And I believe Gerald Celente calls it the Greatest Depression. Let me see. Let me see something. In England, HSBC bought the UK arm of Silicon Valley Bank for a symbolic, £1 this morning. Look at that. And that's what these Rothschilds were saying. You want to buy when there's blood in the streets, or when stocks are dirt cheap. See what happens sometimes when stocks start losing value, people jump ship and sell so that they don't lose everything. And what that does is when they sell, other investors come in and buy their stocks at a cheaper price, and eventually those stocks go back up. Silicon Valley Bank had 175 billion in deposits, but only had 25 billion in insurance. So it was like 151 billion uninsured. There you go. You see? And people don't understand the banking system and how it works. At least not even the fractional reserve part of it. You know, they think they put their money in the bank, that they're safe. You know, but that's not the case. All right, so Ezekiel 7:15, the sword is without, and the pestilence and the famine within. You know, we're witnessing these things happening. He that is in the field shall die with the sword, and he that is in the city, famine and pestilence shall devour him. Right. This happened back then, and it's going to happen now. You know, back during the 1930s, man, people were catching hell. I mean, that was a time, you know, of great distress. And this time is going to be even greater, because this is going to tie into the time of Jacob's trouble. And you got to remember that these people today are not built like they were back in the 20s and 30s. People were a lot stronger mentally back then than they are now. Now a bitch gets shorted, you know, one nugget or one donut, and they're ready to flip out and shoot the whole place up and kill everybody in it. You know? So just imagine when all this shit collapses around them. What do you think they're gonna do? The average Jake out here is not built like that. Let me see. Ecclesiastes 3:1, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. That's right. Verse 6, a time to get and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away. Yeah. So it goes on to say, verse 16, Ezekiel 7:16, but they that escape of them shall escape, and shall be on the mountains like doves of the valley, all of them mourning everyone for his iniquity. Right, because it's going to get bad out here. You know, and even the people that are preppers are going to catch hell, because, yeah, they may be okay for a while, but there's going to be uncertainty. And even the scriptures tell us that, you know, they're going to turn to cannibalism, because they're eventually going to lose that, or they're going to get run over by someone and then have to move and run on and run out of shit, run out of supplies, and end up eating each other. All hands shall be feeble, and all knees shall be weak as water. They shall also gird themselves with sackcloth, and horror shall cover them. And shame shall be upon all faces, and baldness upon all their heads. They shall cast their silver in the streets, and their gold shall be removed. Right, because even those that invest in silver and gold, you know, it's going to come a point where that silver and gold is even going to be useless. You know, because what are you going to do when you can't buy anything? Look, I'll give you a gold coin if you give me some bread. Man, fuck out of here. You know, because even though those metals have value to them, real value, you know, food is going to be more valuable than money in those days. Their silver and their gold shall not be able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of the Lord. And this is what we come into, the day of the wrath of the Lord. You know, beginning with Jacob's trouble and eventually the destruction. They shall not satisfy their souls, neither fill their bowels, because it is the stumbling block of their iniquity. And a lot of people are going to catch hell, man, because it's going to be hell out here. This is a good precept. Ecclesiastes 18:32, take not pleasure in much good cheer, neither be tied to the expense thereof. Right, and that's what happened during the 1920s. These people were in good cheer, and then when October 1929 came to pass, and everything stopped, they went from good times to bad times. You know, there was a scripture in I don't know, it's either the Apocrypha or Proverbs. It says, in a day of prosperity there's forgetfulness of, you know, adversity, and vice versa. In the day of adversity there's forgetfulness of prosperity. So they've witnessed both. They witnessed the prosperity and they witnessed the adversity. You know? Yeah, this is a good one too. Ecclesiastes 18:25, when thou hast enough, remember the time of hunger, And when thou art rich, think about poverty and need, right? And the other scripture goes hand in hand with that, you know, where it speaks about the day of prosperity. You know, you don't, when you're doing good, you don't think about the bad times. And when you're doing bad, you don't think about the good times in most cases. All right, so pretty much I think that's a good place to end. What will they do when the banking system collapses? Oh, here we go. The elder Barak Gabar, Ecclesiastes 11:25 to water. My brother, in the day of prosperity, there is a forgetfulness of affliction. See? And in the day of affliction, there is no more remembrance of prosperity. And this is where the people are heading to, because all this prosperity that they see is going to go, it's going to wane. It's going to go down the hill. You know? All right, so with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified to water for all the precepts and the information you brothers put up. Really appreciate it. And Lord's will, see you on the next one. Shalom.